The average everyday human being sitting behind wood desks and wearing black robes made a very important decision today. And it's probably not as positive as some would think at first glance. Hey guys, before we get into today's video, I want to give a real quick shout out to today's sponsor, Virtual Shield VPN. And the reason I promote it, guys, is because I use it every single day and I know that it works, and I've proven it in videos in the past. If you use the link in the description, you're going to get 50% off, and that's going to help you protect your identity, your activity, and your location anytime you're surfing on the net. That link is in the description below.
Now, we also have the Supreme Court, and somebody made a really good comment in the chat room right as we were going live. Is basically the Supreme Court is going to sit here in their black tyrannical robes and determine, and in this case, they made a right decision and right after it made a wrong decision. Thank you, Kavanaugh and Roberts. We'll get to that in a second. But basically what's on the chopping block here is individual freedoms. The largest minority on the planet, whether you want to believe it or not, I just want to ask you to consider it. The largest minority on the planet is the individual. So what was on the chopping block today was your individual rights and mine, and the individual rights of everybody you love and care for and ever will love and care for. That should never be on the chopping block. You should always err on the side of freedom. It's like, oh, wait a second. This mandate is actually asking us to rule on whether we should take away freedoms from individuals or not. RIP. That's all I need to know. I don't need some long dissertation, some verbose letter stating why I dissented. It's like, it's obviously against individual freedoms, but that's not the way they look at it. It's far more complex and convoluted, and people breathe a sigh of relief and go, oh, good. The Supreme Court did the right thing. The right thing would be, I'm not even going to listen to this case because it's individual rights. The judge should go, it's my individual rights on the chopping block, and nobody's got a right to deliberate on that. Nobody. From the AP, Supreme Court halts Convids 1984 by George Orwell VXX rule for U.S. businesses. So basically what they're saying is the federal government doesn't have the right to tell private businesses what they or their employees can or can't do in regard to what goes into their body. Which is interesting to me. I'm kind of surprised, given Jacobson versus Massachusetts back in 1904, 1905, that they actually landed on this, because you would think that every one of them would go, well, for the sake of public health, we got to do this. Of course, it's perfectly legitimate to take away individual rights if it's for the common good or for the sake of public health. We want to save people, don't we? The Supreme Court has stopped a major push by the Biden administration to boost the nation's you-know-what VXX rate, a requirement that employees at large businesses bow down and become paying customers ad infinitum to the big farm guy, or test regularly and wear a ritualistic shame muzzle on the job. So the federal government's coming in here going, hey, businesses over here, we're going to force you to make your employees do this, and we're going to force you to do this. And the Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, I think it was, said, no, you can't do that. We're not going to do that. But wait, there's more. There's a twist. There's an evil, vile twist to this. At the same time, the court is allowing the administration to proceed with a VXX mandate for most healthcare workers in the U.S. Guess who you can thank for that? Trump appointed Kavanaugh. Bush appointed John Roberts. Remember, John Roberts is the reason we got Obamacare. He was the one deciding factor. If John Roberts had said no, we would have never seen Obamacare. But Bush appointee, conservative, Republican, playing for Team Red, says, yes, let's do Obamacare. The court's orders Thursday came during a spike in, you know what, caused by the moronic. The court's conservative majority concluded the administration overstepped its authority. That's what they're in the habit of doing. The federal government is in the business of overstepping its authority. If it weren't so, then we wouldn't have the IRS and the Federal Reserve. That's overstepping your authority. And I'm not saying the Federal Reserve is part of the government, because they're a private entity who controls and has hold of the strings and the reins and the levers of power. By seeking to impose an occupational safety and health administration's VXX or test rule on U.S. businesses with at least 100 employees, that they would even consider that tells you what kind of era we're living in. More than 80 million people would have been affected, and OSHA had estimated that the rule would have saved. So OSHA's going, well, because the judges made this decision, you in the 6-3 Supreme Court decision, you have cost the lives of 6,500 people. OSHA is saying that. OSHA is saying the Supreme Court just cost the lives of 6,500 people by making this decision. And they opened the floodgates for 250,000 hospitalizations over the next 6 months. That's what OSHA is basically saying here. Because it says more than 80 million people would have been affected, and OSHA had estimated that the rule would save 6,500 lives and prevent 250,000 hospitalizations over the next 6 months. The conservatives wrote in an unsigned opinion, OSHA has never before imposed such a mandate, nor has Congress. Indeed, although Congress has enacted significant legislation addressing the you-know-what, it has declined to enact any measure similar to what OSHA has promulgated here. In dissent, the court's 3 liberals argued that it was the court that was overreaching by substituting its judgment for that of health experts. So basically they're saying, you should have severed the head of individual rights as it lay there screaming for mercy on the chopping block, but you didn't do it because you put yourselves in the position of health experts and authorities. How dare you? Shame on you, say the 3 liberal judges that voted for this nonsense. Acting outside of its competence and without legal basis, what do you call the Fourth Amendment? The right to be secure in your persons. That's in your body. You have the right to be secure in your body. Nobody has the right to mandate or force you to put something in your body you don't want there. Period. Legal basis. What's the Fourth Amendment? Chop liver? It is to these people. Breyer, Kagan, and Sotomayor. The court displaces the judgment of the government officials given the responsibility to respond to workplace health emergency. In other words, all you 6 people who voted against this mandate from the Biden administration, you have just jeopardized public health. Good job. President Joe Biden said he was, quote, disappointed that the Supreme Court has chosen to block common sense, life-saving requirements for employees at large businesses that were grounded squarely in both science and law. I don't care about science. I don't care about law. You know what I care about? I care about freedom. Because once you take away freedom, you lose everything. You lose in power, and the federal bureaucracy gains in power. And those are the last psychopaths that you want with power. Why? Because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's what this was right here. The Biden administration wanting to institute this onto large companies was actually a power and wealth transfer grab is exactly what it was. Biden called on businesses to institute their own VAXX requirements, noting that a third of the Fortune 100 companies have already done so. When crafting OSHA rules, let me get down to this right here. All right, so the VAXX mandate that the court will allow to be enforced. Let's just highlight that word right there. Enforce. What did George Washington say? Government is not eloquence. It is not reason. It is force. And like fire, it's a dangerous servant and a fearful master. The VAXX mandate that the court will allow to be enforced nationwide scraped by on a 5-4 vote with Chief Justice John Roberts, conservative, Republican, playing for Team Red, and Justice Brett Kavanaugh joining the liberals to form a majority. So if it wasn't for John Roberts and Brett Kavanaugh, then the healthcare workers wouldn't be forced by the Biden administration to bow down at the altar of Jabbo. But now, because of Kavanaugh and Roberts and the other 3 liberal justices, it is so. It is so. We have found that the healthcare workers do not deserve the individual right to decide whether they can have something go into their body or not. The mandate covers virtually all healthcare workers in the country, applying to providers that receive federal Medicare or Medicaid funding. It affects 10.4 million workers at 76,000 healthcare facilities, as well as home healthcare providers. The rule has medical and religious exemptions. You shouldn't need medical and you should. How about my human being exemption? How about, you're calling it the supreme law of the land, Supreme Court justices and President of the United States and Vice President and law enforcers and politicians. You're calling the Bill of Rights the supreme law of the land, which includes my right to be secure in my person's houses, papers, and effects, like the Fourth Amendment says. But you're saying, oh, I can have a medical and religious exemption? How about my human rights exemption? How about my individual liberties and freedoms exemption? So while one part of it makes sense, and I'm not even saying that it's right, because our individual liberties should never have been on the chopping block on this in the first place. Nobody should. And when injustice happens to one man anywhere, injustice happens to all men everywhere. And this sets yet another precedent that the Supreme Court can decide how free you're going to be in the land of the free, home of the brave, which is really the land of the fee, home of the slave. But thanks to Justice John Roberts and Brett Kavanaugh, Republicans, they joined the liberals in saying, well, if you're a healthcare worker, you don't have a choice. We'll grant you. We'll grant you, because we're gods. We're the black-robed, godlike tyrants. We'll grant you a religious and maybe a medical exemption. But you got to go through a bunch of hoops and loops. Forget about freedom. Forget about erring on the side of freedom. Forget about the Constitution. Forget about land of the free, home of the brave. Forget about any of those ideals that they talk about. It sucks, man. This whole thing sucks. Daily Wire put something out on it. Leave your thoughts about this. I want to know what you guys have to say about this. What do you think? Should the Supreme Court be allowed to say how free you're going to be? Should the black robe tyrants of the Supreme Court be allowed to say that these people over here need to bow down at the altar of Jabbo and enrich the big farm guy, but these people over here, should anybody have that kind of power? I don't care. Put a black robe on them. Call them Supreme Court justices. Say they're gods from another universe. I don't care. It doesn't make it right.
Guys, we already know that they want to decimate the dollar, destroy the economy, bring us into a cashless society, and eventually make it difficult for us to even get food. That's why I constantly promote My Patriot Supply. Every chance I get, I turn my fiat currency notes into long-term storable food. This stuff is awesome. It's got a 25-year shelf life. And one thing we're all going to need is storable food. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. With my link in the description, you get $100 off of every order instantly. It'd be a good idea to order it while you can, because I'm not sure how much longer they're going to be able to ship this out. My link for your $100 off discount is in the description below.